In 334 BC, Alexander, young king of Macedonia, launched one of the most extraordinary military campaigns the world had ever seen. At just 20 years old, he marched against the superpower of the age, the vast Persian Empire. His daring leadership and unmatched tactical brilliance carried him from one victory to the next. Over the span of a decade, pushing ever farther toward the edge of the known world, he forged an empire so immense it stood among history's greatest. Ancient Greece, around 500 BC, was a rugged land brimming with artistic, philosophical, and military innovation. Its two dominant city-states stood in stark contrast. Athens, a naval power where democracy, art, drama, and philosophy flourished. And Sparta, a disciplined warrior society renowned for its unrivaled infantry. In 480 BC, these longtime rivals united against an invasion by the mighty Persian Empire. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a small Greek force led by 300 Spartans held back the vast Persian host for 3 days before being overwhelmed. Soon after, in the Straits of Salamis, the Greek fleet inflicted a crushing defeat on the Persian navy, yet they could not stop the destruction of the sacred temples atop the Athenian Acropolis. A year later, at Plataea, the Greeks finally forced the Persians to abandon their invasion. The 50 years that followed became the golden age of classical Greece, but rising tensions between Athens and Sparta soon plunged the Greek world into generations of ruinous warfare. By the end of nearly a century of conflict, the city-states were weakened, and exposed to a new rising power in the north. For centuries, cultured Greeks sneered at Macedonia, dismissing it as a rural backwater. But under King Philip II, Macedonia transformed into a military powerhouse. Philip's most revolutionary change was the adoption of the sarissa, an 18-foot-long pike, twice the length of a typical Greek spear, wielded by highly trained infantry in a tight, devastating formation, the phalanx. In 338 BC, Philip crushed the allied armies of Athens and Thebes at the Battle of Kyrenia. Through conquest and diplomacy, he unified Greece under the Hellenic League, with himself as hegemon, supreme commander. Only Sparta refused to join. Philip then turned his vision toward a grand Panhellenic campaign, a united Greek invasion of the rich, aging Persian Empire. But on the eve of launching his war, he was assassinated by a member of his own bodyguard, victim of the relentless intrigue of the Macedonian court. Philip's 20-year-old son, Alexander, restlessly brilliant and educated by Aristotle himself, succeeded him. But before he could pursue his father's dream, he had to secure his crown. Alexander eliminated rivals at home, then crushed revolts in Illyria, Thessaly, and central Greece. To set an unmistakable example, he utterly destroyed the ancient city of Thebes, selling its population into slavery. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander was finally ready. He led his army across the Hellespont into Asia Minor, beginning one of history's greatest military adventures. Alexander commanded roughly 40,000 men, drawn from every corner of Greece. His infantry line was built around 9,000 Macedonian phalangites, armed with the long sarissa and arranged in the deep, iron-tipped wall of the phalanx. These elite soldiers were formidable in frontal combat, though less maneuverable and vulnerable on the flanks. To protect this weakness stood 3,000 Hypaspists, elite infantry wielding shorter spears, commanded by Nicanor, son of the general Parmenion. Behind them formed a second line of 7,000 Greek allied troops and 5,000 mercenaries, armed as traditional hoplites with their round shields and shorter spears. The army also included the elite Agrianian javelin throwers, and various Thracian and Illyrian skirmishers equipped with bows, slings, and javelins. Alexander's greatest striking force, however, was his companion cavalry, 1,800 elite horsemen led by Philotas. Alexander himself rode with the royal squadron. Additional cavalry included 1,800 Thessalians, 600 Greek horsemen, and 900 scouts from Thrace and Paeonia. The Persian Empire was divided into satrapies, provinces ruled by governors. Those in Asia Minor gathered to decide how to confront the Macedonian invasion. Memnon of Rhodes, a brilliant Greek commander in Persian service, advised a scorched earth strategy: burn crops, withdraw inland, and starve Alexander's army. But the satraps refused to devastate their own lands without a fight. Instead, they chose to confront Alexander at the river Granicus. There, behind the shallow but steep-banked river, the Persians formed their line. Roughly 10,000 cavalry, Medes, Hyrcanians, Bactrians, Paphlagonians, and more, held the front, while several thousand Greek mercenaries waited in reserve. Determined to crush this Persian force before it could withdraw, Alexander arrived quickly and drew up his troops. Parmenion held the left with Thessalian and Greek cavalry. The phalanx stood in the center in 6 divisions. Alexander took command of the right, the companions, the Hypaspists, the Agrianians, and the archers. With around 18,000 men, he was slightly outnumbered, but he refused to wait for dawn. Instead, he ordered an immediate assault. A squadron of companion cavalry splashed into the river first, followed by Hypaspists and Paeonian light cavalry. Alexander himself led the next wave, calling on his men to prove their courage. As they crossed the river, Persian missiles rained down upon them. Those who reached the far bank were slammed by a furious Persian cavalry charge. A brutal melee erupted. Horses crashed together, and shields splintered as Macedonians struggled to claw their way up the bank while Persians tried to drive them back into the river. Rosacea rode forward and smashed his sword onto Alexander's helmet, breaking a piece of it off. Dazed but alive, Alexander thrust his lance into him, killing him. But as he recovered, Spithridates raised his weapon for a killing blow from behind. Only for Clitus the Black to intervene, slicing off the attacker's arm before he could strike. With the Macedonians now across the river, the Persian cavalry faltered before the advancing wall of Sarissas and broke. The Greek mercenaries in the Persian rear, still uncommitted, were surrounded, and Alexander ordered no mercy. They were slaughtered to the last. Alexander had won a stunning victory. Asia Minor lay open before him. But the Persian Empire still possessed unimaginable wealth and manpower. Its king, Darius III, now prepared to face the young conqueror personally. If Alexander was to seize the empire and etch his name into history, his greatest challenges were still to come.